Senator Rain.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's very, very important that your words be heard as widely as possible. I'd like to address my first question to Mrs. Porath. You mentioned the age that, that with youth using it, 9% became, had done it regularly, and then 17%, these are youths who became vulnerable to the effects of cannabis, and 17% as teens, and 50% of those teenagers who used it on a daily or near daily basis. And I had never heard that 50% of regular teenage users would go on to have to be very vulnerable to becoming addicted to it. And I just would like you to confirm that I heard that right, because I hadn't heard it be that high, but I'm afraid it is.
So that's a great question. So of those who started using cannabis during adolescence, the rate is 1 in 6, or 17%, and the rate increases to as high as 1 in 2 for those who are using cannabis daily or on a near daily basis. And this statistic was cited from the World Health Organization's 2015 report looking at the social and health effects of non-medical cannabis use. I can provide the reference to that report at the end if that would be helpful.
But I find that very alarming, and then listening to both of you discuss the need to go a little slower and to really focus on public education around what could be determined as to be a safe use of marijuana. So I guess I look at, we have had medical marijuana available legally in Canada for some years now. So I'd like to ask Dr. Callant, have we, in my experience in talking to a family practitioner who practiced in an area of our province, British Columbia, where there was a high use of cannabis, and he is reluctant or will not prescribe marijuana because he said the medical research has just not been done, and there's never been a pharmacological product introduced and legalized for use in our country without the controls that normal pharmaceuticals go through. So could you comment on the existing state of knowledge about the pharmacological use of cannabis and how that's going? Because we've now been doing it for several years. Is the research coming forward as to how doctors should prescribe it?
Thank you. That's, again, I think that's an important piece of knowledge that not only the public at large, but that Parliament has to consider. I would first say that, in my view, medical and non-medical use should be clearly recognized as separate issues. Just as a reminder, it is legal in Canada to prescribe heroin for patients in terminal stages of cancer. It's almost impossible to find the heroin because there was so little demand for it that the company that imported it from the UK simply stopped bringing it in. It didn't pay them. Nevertheless, it is legal. There's also some very small, limited legal use of cocaine in nose and throat surgery. Yet nobody says that because there is legal use, therefore cocaine and heroin and other drugs that have medical use should be freely available to anybody for non-medical use. It simply does not make sense. They are two separate issues and should be regarded as such. However, to come back to the question of so-called medical use, there are certain purposes which cannabis can be useful for treating. Certain symptoms or illnesses that cannabis can be useful for treating. It has not received approval from Health Canada for a rather routine reason. Ordinarily, when Health Canada is asked to approve a new drug, the company that proposes to manufacture it has done research or has financed research in universities and elsewhere that establish its effectiveness, its safety, and its comparative effectiveness relative to other drugs used for treating the same problems. Since cannabis is a natural product, you can't patent it. Therefore, no drug company has had an interest in applying to Health Canada for permission to legalize plant cannabis. Only those that have produced pure cannabinoids, the active ingredients, or modified extracts that have a high percentage of CBD and a moderate or low percentage of THC, only those have applied for and have received approval from Health Canada. But there is not likely to be an application for approval of the plant material. So we have to rely on what clinical trials have shown. And in that, I would like to say very briefly that there are a few functions for which moderately high or moderate low THC is useful, and higher CBD is even more useful. And these include relief of chronic pain of certain types, stimulation of appetite in people with cancer chemotherapy, for example, treatment of certain forms of epilepsy, especially in children, in whom you don't want the THC, but CBD is quite effective. These are uses which are continuing to be developed, and I would say that there is a place for certain forms of cannabis or cannabinoids, and there is a need to educate physicians more broadly on what those uses, what those proper uses are, and what claimed uses are not. For example, a claim that it's useful in treating high intraocular pressure that results in damage to the eye, that is not a valid use, because it has been shown that you need to control the intraocular pressure in glaucoma 24 hours a day to prevent damage to the retina. If you want to use it therapeutically, you would have to use it repeatedly, day and night, and this is simply not practical. So I think that's all that I can usefully add at this point.
So
Okay,
just,
thank you. No, I have to